I want to start by saying I am not someone who scares easily. I grew up camping. My father took me into the woods every summer from the age of 6. I know how forests sound at night. I know the difference between an animal in the brush and a branch falling from a dead tree. I know what wind sounds like moving through different kinds of canopy. I know forests, or I thought I did. Until the night I camped alone in Ashford Forest and came face to face with something that has no name in any language I know. It was the summer I turned 24. I had just gone through a bad breakup, lost my apartment shortly after, spent 2 weeks sleeping on a friend's couch, feeling sorry for myself before I decided I needed to get out of the city and breathe. Camping had always been my reset button. The place I went when the noise in my head got too loud. I packed my gear in one afternoon. Tent, sleeping bag, 3 days of food, flashlight, and a backup flashlight because my father always said only fools carry one light into the dark. I drove 4 hours out of the city and turned onto the forest road that led to Ashford. I had been to Ashford twice before, once with friends in college, once alone 2 years prior. Both times it had been exactly what I needed. Dense trees, a creek running through the middle. A clearing about a mile in that was perfect for a tent. No phone signal, which I considered a feature, not a bug. Just me in the forest and enough silence to actually think. I parked at the trailhead at around 4 p.m. Enough daylight to make it to the clearing comfortably. I signed the trail log at the entrance the way you were supposed to. Nobody else had signed in for 3 days. That was normal for Ashford. It was not a popular trail. No marked paths beyond the first half mile. No facilities, the kind of place that filters out casual hikers and leaves only people who actually know what they are doing. The walk-in was perfect. That specific kind of quiet that only exists deep in forests far from roads. The creek was running well for October. I found the clearing exactly where I remembered it and had my tent up before the last of the daylight faded, made a fire, cooked my food, sat with a cup of coffee watching the flames, and felt for the first time in weeks like something in my chest had unclenched. I was asleep by 10. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I did not know why. That is always the most unsettling way to wake up in the dark. No sound that you can identify. No obvious reason. Just eyes open and brain already at full alert, like something inside you saw something your conscious mind missed. I lay still in my sleeping bag listening. The fire had died down to embers. The forest outside the tent was quiet. Too quiet in the way I described earlier. The specific absence of sound that means something has changed in the environment, and every living creature in the area has gone still in response. I unzipped the tent slowly and stepped out. The clearing was lit by a half moon that gave just enough light to see the tree line on all sides. Nothing moved. I stood there for a full minute just listening. Then I grabbed my flashlight and swept it slowly around the perimeter of the clearing. That is when I saw it, standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 30 meters away. Between two large oaks, it was tall, taller than any person, 7 feet at least, thin in the way that immediately told your brain this was not a person even before you had processed why. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the shoulders too narrow. It was wearing something dark, robes or a cloak, something that moved slightly even though there was no wind, and it was holding something. A scythe, long-handled, the blade catching the moonlight in a way that made it look almost beautiful for one completely insane second before my brain caught up with what I was actually looking at. It was not moving, just standing, at the edge of the trees, facing me. I could not see a face. The hood of whatever it was wearing was pulled forward, and the space inside it was just darkness. But I knew it was looking at me the same way you know someone across a dark room is watching you, even when you cannot see their eyes. My flashlight beam hit it directly. It did not react, did not flinch, did not move. Just stood there in the beam of my flashlight like it had been standing there for a long time and was entirely comfortable being seen. That stillness was somehow worse than if it had run. Something about its complete lack of reaction to being caught in the light made my skin feel like it was trying to leave my body. I took one step back toward my tent. It took one step forward out of the tree line. I stopped. It stopped. We stood there in the clearing in the middle of Ashford Forest at 2 a.m., looking at each other across 30 meters of open ground, and I understood with complete and terrible clarity that whatever rules applied to the natural world did not apply to this thing. There was no logic I could use here, no animal behavior I could predict, no camping knowledge that was going to help me. I did the only thing I could think of. I did not move. For what felt like 20 minutes, but was probably closer to 5, we stood completely still. Me with my flashlight trained on it. It with that scythe at its side and that empty hood where a face should have been. Then slowly, incrementally, it began to move backward. 1 step, 2, back toward the tree line, back into the shadow between the oaks. The darkness swallowed it from the feet upward until the last thing I could see was the moonlight catching the blade of the scythe. Then that was gone too. I did not sleep. I sat in my tent with my back against my pack and both flashlights on and my camping knife in my hand until the first gray light of dawn came through the tent fabric. Then I packed everything as fast as I have ever packed anything in my life, and I walked out of Ashford Forest without looking back once. I have told this story to 4 people. 2 of them suggested I was half asleep and dreamed it. 1 suggested it was a person in a costume. 1 said nothing at all, just looked at me for a long time. I have thought about all 3 reactions. I understand them. I would probably have the same reactions if someone told me this story. But here's what I keep coming back to. When I packed up my tent that morning and rolled up the ground sheet underneath it, I found something pressed into the dirt where I'd been sleeping. The shape was unmistakable even in the early morning light. The tip of a scythe blade, pressed into the earth directly below where my head had been. It had been inside the tent, while I was standing 30 meters away watching it at the tree line. There were 2 of them. I have not been camping since. I had been working 14-hour days for 3 months straight. No breaks, no weekends, no time to breathe, just deadlines and screens and the kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix and coffee cannot touch. My boss had stopped asking how I was doing. My friends had stopped inviting me places because I always canceled. I was running on empty and I knew it, and I did not know how to stop. So on a Friday night, I threw my camping gear in the back of my car and drove to Ashford Forest alone. No plan, no destination, no itinerary, just me and 3 days of silence and the desperate hope that the trees would give me back something the city had been slowly taking from me for months. I arrived at the trailhead just before sunset, signed the log at the entrance. Nobody else had signed in for 4 days. That was fine by me. I preferred it that way. I hiked in about a mile and found the clearing I had used once before 2 summers ago. Flat ground, good tree coverage, a creek close enough to hear but far enough not to be annoying. Perfect. I had my tent up before dark, made a fire, cooked my food and ate it in complete silence, watching the flames and feeling something in my chest slowly unknot itself for the first time in months. No notifications, no emails, no noise. Just the fire and the trees and the creek and the specific kind of peace that only exists far from roads. By 9 p.m., I was inside my sleeping bag. I was asleep within minutes, the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who has been running on fumes for too long and has finally been given permission to stop. I woke up at exactly 2 a.m. to a gunshot. Single. Clean. Loud enough to snap me from deep sleep to full alert in half a second. I sat up with my heart already hammering, grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the tent, and stepped out into the clearing. The air was cold and still. I swept the flashlight beam slowly around the entire perimeter of the clearing. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound. The forest was completely silent in that specific wrong way that means every living creature in the area has gone still at the same time. I walked the full perimeter twice, checked the tree line in every direction, found nothing. No animals, no people, no shell casing on the ground, no explanation whatsoever. I stood in the middle of the clearing for 5 full minutes just listening. Nothing. I told myself it was a hunter doing something irresponsible in the dark and turned back toward my tent. It was on fire, fully engulfed, not smoldering, not just catching, fully on fire with flames reaching 6 feet into the air, consuming my tent and my sleeping bag and my food supply and everything else I'd brought with me. I ran toward it instinctively, but the heat hit me like a wall and pushed me back. I stood there watching 3 days of supplies burn with no phone signal and no way out of this forest without my car keys, which were somewhere inside that fire. I waited for the flames to die down. It took 20 minutes. When the fire finally reduced to embers and ash, I stepped closer and started searching for my keys with a stick. That is when I noticed the footprints. They were pressed deep into the soft earth around the burnt remains of my tent. Large, deliberate, not boot prints, not any animal track I recognized, something in between. Something that made the logical part of my brain go very quiet. They started at the northern tree line and circled my tent twice in a perfect loop before heading back into the forest in a straight line pointing north. I should have stayed put, I know that. But my car keys were gone and I had no phone signal, and 3 days of food had just turned to ash, and something about those prints told me that whatever made them had not finished with me yet. I followed them north into the forest, my flashlight cutting through the dark between the trees. The prints were consistent, heavy, spaced far apart like whatever made them was tall and completely unhurried, like it knew exactly where it was going and was not concerned about being followed. After about 20 minutes, the prints stopped, mid-stride, in a small circular clearing I had not seen before and was not on any trail I knew. I swept my flashlight around it slowly. In the center of the clearing was my tent, fully assembled, perfectly set up, not a single burn mark on it. My gear stacked neatly inside, my sleeping bag laid out flat, and sitting on top of the sleeping bag directly in the center, my car keys. I stood at the edge of that clearing for a long time, just staring at it. Every part of me knew I should not step inside, but I had no other choice, and whatever had done this already knew exactly where I was. I walked in slowly, grabbed my keys, turned to leave, and saw the message written in the dirt at the entrance of the tent. Large letters, pressed deep, written with something that was not a finger. Next time, stay home. I ran. I did not look back once. I hit the trail and followed it out to the car and drove for 4 hours straight without music, without stopping, without once checking the rearview mirror. I handed in my resignation the following Monday. I have not been fatigued since. Margaret Ashworth died on a Tuesday in late autumn, alone in the house she had lived in for 60 years. I had met her exactly twice in my life. Once as a child, at a family gathering I barely remembered. Once at my own mother's funeral, when she stood at the back of the room and left before anyone could speak to her. She was my grandmother, a woman I knew almost nothing about, who left me her house in a will nobody saw coming. The lawyer called 2 weeks after she passed. There was no other family left to contest it. No siblings, no other children. Just me, inheriting a 4-bedroom house on Wren Hollow Road that I had visited exactly once, 20 years ago, for an afternoon I barely remembered. I drove out the following weekend, more out of curiosity than any real plan to keep the place. It sat at the end of a quiet road, surrounded by old oak trees that had clearly been there longer than the house itself. It looked exactly like what it was. An old woman's home, untouched by trends or renovations, frozen somewhere around 1985 and left that way. The inside smelled like dust and old paper. Furniture covered in thin sheets. Photographs on every wall. Most of people I did not recognize. Decades of a life I knew nothing about. I spent the first afternoon just walking through rooms, running my hand along furniture, trying to feel some connection to a woman I had essentially never known. It was in the attic where I found the journals. There were 11 of them, lined up neatly on a shelf beneath a single dusty window, each one a different color, spanning what I would later realize were 11 consecutive years. I pulled the first one down and sat on the dusty floor to read it, expecting mundane details of an old woman's daily life. Grocery lists, weather complaints, the kind of thing people write when they think no one will ever read it. Instead, every single entry described the same dream. She wrote about a hallway she did not recognize, narrow and dim, with doors on either side that she never opened. She wrote about a sound, distant at first, that grew louder the further she walked. A low, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wood. She wrote about always waking up at the exact same point in the dream, just as she reached the end of the hallway and a door at the far end began to open on its own. I assumed it was just an old woman's recurring nightmare, documented obsessively for reasons I would never understand. I read through 3 more journals before I noticed the dates becoming more frequent. In the early journals, the dream appeared once a month, maybe twice. By the 7th journal, it was nightly. By the 10th, multiple times a night. The 11th journal was different. Most of the pages were blank. The final entries, dated just 2 weeks before her death, were barely legible, her handwriting deteriorating into something frantic and uneven. The last entry was 4 words long. It is at the door. I sat in that attic for a long time after reading it, the light fading outside the small window, telling myself it meant nothing. An old woman, isolated and alone for years, losing her grip on reality the way people sometimes do near the end. Nothing more than that. I decided to stay the first night anyway. Practical reasons, I told myself. I needed to start sorting through her things, and driving back and forth from the city would waste time I did not have. I chose the smallest bedroom, the one that had clearly been a guest room, rather than my grandmother's own bedroom down the hall, which I could not bring myself to enter yet. I fell asleep faster than I expected, exhausted from the drive and the dust and the strange weight of the day. I dreamed of a hallway, narrow, dim, doors on either side that I did not open, though I felt a strong, specific urge not to. I walked forward without deciding to walk, the way dreams sometimes move you without consent, and somewhere behind me, distant but growing closer, I heard it. A low, wet, dragging sound, heavy and deliberate, like something enormous being pulled slowly across wooden floorboards. I woke up at 3 a.m., completely still, my heart pounding in a way that took several minutes to settle. The room was dark and unfamiliar in the way unfamiliar rooms always are at 3 a.m. Shadows in the wrong places, silence too complete. I told myself it was nothing. A strange house, an unsettling discovery, an overactive imagination working overtime. I went back to sleep eventually, though it took almost an hour. The dream did not return that night. But over the following week, as I stayed in the house sorting through decades of my grandmother's belongings, it returned 3 more times, each time identical. The hallway, the doors I did not open, the dragging sound growing slightly louder, slightly closer each time I had the dream. On the 5th night, I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. again. But this time the silence was wrong in a way I could feel before I understood why. I lay still, listening, and after a long moment I heard it. Not in the dream, in the house itself. A low, wet, dragging sound, distant but unmistakable, coming from somewhere down the hallway outside my door. I did not move for nearly 20 minutes, When the sound finally stopped, I forced myself to get up, telling myself it was an old house settling, pipes, anything rational I could think of. I opened my door and looked down the hallway. Empty. Silent. Exactly as it should have been. But at the far end, my grandmother's bedroom door, which I'd kept firmly closed since arriving, stood open. Just slightly. A gap of perhaps 6 inches, darkness pooling beyond it. I did not sleep again that night. I sat in the guest room with the light on until morning, and as soon as the sun rose, I went down the hallway and pulled my grandmother's door shut again, checking twice that the old latch was properly fastened. It was open again by evening. I left the house the next morning and did not return for 3 weeks, telling myself I needed time, that grief and exhaustion had simply gotten the better of me, that none of it meant what some primal part of my brain insisted it meant. When I finally went back, intending only to arrange for the house to be sold, I went up to the attic one final time to retrieve the journals, planning to read through the remaining details I had skipped. They were gone. All 11 of them vanished from the shelf where I had left them. The thin layer of dust on the shelf undisturbed, except for 11 rectangular outlines where they had once sat. I sold the house within the month to a young couple who seemed thrilled with the price and the location. I did not mention the journals. I did not mention the dream. I told myself it was not my responsibility to explain something I could not explain myself. I still have the dream sometimes, even now, years later and many miles away. The same hallway, the same doors I never open, the same dragging sound somewhere behind me, patient and unhurried, exactly as loud now as it was the final night I spent in that house. Last month, the young woman who bought the house found my number through the old lawyer and called me, her voice carefully controlled in a way that told me she was trying very hard not to sound as frightened as she clearly was. She asked if my grandmother had ever mentioned a hallway in her dreams. I have not answered her calls since. This is the story of how I barely survived Siren Head when I accidentally entered the Blackwood Forest. It all started when I was 21. And I want you to understand something before I begin. I am not the kind of person who believes in monsters. I was not then, and I fought hard not to be after. But there are things that happen to you in this life that do not care whether you believe in them or not. They happen anyway. And they change you in ways you cannot explain to anyone who was not there. I was not supposed to be in that forest. That is the first thing. I was not an explorer, or a thrill seeker, or someone who deliberately walks into dark places looking for something to write about. I was a 21-year-old on a solo road trip trying to clear my head after a rough year. Dropped out of university, lost a friend, felt like I needed to drive somewhere far and think. That was the entire plan. Drive, think, come back with some kind of clarity. Instead, I came back with this. It was late October, the kind of October that already smells like winter. The air had that specific bite to it that gets into your lungs and makes everything feel more serious than it is. I had been driving for 6 hours through a stretch of rural highway I did not recognize and had not planned to be on. My GPS had been rerouting me for the last 2 hours through roads that kept getting narrower and darker and less maintained. I should have stopped at the last gas station I passed. I remember seeing it. Lights on, a truck parked outside, a normal human place. I drove past it because I thought I was close to where I was going. I was not close to where I was going. I was not close to anything. The road ended at a tree line, not a parking lot, not a designated trail, just a dirt road that stopped at the edge of a forest as if whoever built it had simply given up. I stepped out of the car and the silence hit me immediately. Not peaceful silence, the other kind. The kind that makes you realize you have not seen another car in over an hour. the kind that reminds you nobody knows exactly where you are right now. I checked my phone. No signal. GPS was spinning. The battery was at 14%. I made the decision that I now look back on as the single worst decision I've ever made in my life. I decided to walk into the forest just far enough to find higher ground and get a signal. 5 minutes. 10 at most. Then back to the car. I want to go back in time and grab myself by the collar. The forest swallowed me almost immediately. That is the only way I can describe it. One moment I could see the tree line behind me and my car parked on the dirt road. Then the trees closed in and I could not see either anymore. The canopy above was so thick it blocked out what little evening light was left. I was walking in near darkness within minutes, relying on my phone flashlight, which was eating my remaining battery faster than I wanted to think about. I kept walking, telling myself the clearing was just ahead, just past the next cluster of trees, just a little further. The way your brain lies to you when it has already committed to something and does not want to admit the mistake. Then I noticed the silence had changed. Up until that point, there had been small sounds. Wind through leaves, the distant crack of a branch somewhere, the ambient noise of a living forest. Normal things. But somewhere between the 5th and 6th minute of walking, those sounds disappeared completely. No wind, no birds, no insects, nothing. Just my footsteps on dead leaves, which suddenly sounded obscenely loud. Like I was the only living thing for miles, and the forest was listening to every step I took. I stopped walking, and that is when I heard it for the first time. It started low, a frequency more felt than heard, like the air pressure had changed around me. Then it built into something recognizable, an emergency broadcast tone, long and electronic and completely out of place in the middle of a forest with no roads and no buildings and no possible source. I turned around slowly looking for anything. A tower? A structure? Anything. There was nothing, just trees disappearing into darkness in every direction. The tone got louder. I started moving faster, not running, walking with the specific kind of urgency that comes just before running. The kind where your body already knows what your mind has not admitted yet. I told myself tower, radio equipment, emergency services, normal explanations for abnormal sounds in abnormal places. My brain was working overtime to keep me calm, and it was failing. Then the tone changed. It shifted mid-frequency into something that made my legs stop working entirely. A voice. Clear and warm and completely impossible, my mother's voice, calling my name. The exact cadence she uses when she is calling me for dinner. Relaxed, affectionate, like she was standing 20 feet away behind the next tree and had been expecting me. I have never felt terror and longing collide so violently in the same moment. Every rational part of me knew it was wrong. My mother was at home, hundreds of miles away. She did not know where I was. She could not be here. But something older than rationality lives in you when you hear your mother's voice. Something that bypasses every logical circuit in your brain and goes straight to the part of you that is still a child. My mouth started to open. I almost called back. I was one breath away from calling back. Something stopped me, not a thought, not a decision. Just a feeling so primal it moved through me like electricity. Do not make a sound. Do not move. Do not breathe. I looked up. Between two trees, roughly 200 meters ahead of me, something was standing. My eyes could not process it at first. My brain kept trying to reframe it as something familiar. A dead tree. A cell tower. A structure of some kind. But it was not any of those things. It was alive. I could feel that it was alive the way you feel a thunderstorm before you hear it. A pressure in the atmosphere that has nothing to do with weather. It was enormous, 40 feet tall at minimum, impossibly thin. Its body was the color of pale, dead skin stretched over something that was not quite the right shape underneath. Its limbs were too long. The proportions all wrong in ways that made your eyes want to slide away from it. like your vision itself was rejecting what it was looking at. And where the head should have been, two large industrial sirens, old and rusted and enormous, mounted on a neck that should not have been able to support them, rotating slowly, deliberately, scanning the tree line the way a lighthouse scans dark water, looking for the source of the sound it had just heard, looking for me. I understood in that moment with a clarity I have never felt before or since exactly what was happening. It was broadcasting my mother's voice to make me call back, to triangulate my position, to find me in the dark the way a bat finds a moth. And I had almost given myself away. I had been one breath away from walking directly into whatever it was that thing did to the people it found. I did not breathe. I did not blink. I stood with my back against a tree and I made myself as small and as silent as a person can make themselves while their heart is trying to break through their ribcage. The sirens rotated, passed over my direction, kept moving. The voice called my name again from a slightly different position now, moving through the trees, searching. Then it shifted back into the emergency tone, and getting quieter, moving away from me through the forest like a ship moving through fog, getting smaller, getting further. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, an eternity. Then I ran. I have never run like that. I was not a runner. Had never been athletic. None of that mattered. My body found resources I did not know I had. I ran through darkness, through branches that cut my face, and roots that tried to trip me, and I got up every time without thinking, without stopping, without anything in my head except the sound of my own feet and the desperate animal need to reach my car. I do not know how long it took. Time had stopped working properly. But I broke through the tree line and the dirt road was there and my car was there exactly where I had left it, and I have never been so grateful for anything in my entire life. I got in, locked every door, sat there shaking so violently I dropped my keys twice before I could get them in the ignition. I sat there in the dark for what felt like a long time, just breathing, just existing, just being grateful that I was still the kind of thing that breathed. When I finally turned on the headlights, I checked my rearview mirror. It was standing at the edge of the tree line, all 40 feet of it, perfectly still now. The sirens had stopped rotating. They were pointed directly at my car, at me. It had found me after all, not in time, but it had found me. It did not move as I reversed down the dirt road, did not move as I turned onto the highway. It just stood there at the edge of its forest, watching me leave with those massive, rusted sirens that had no eyes but saw everything. I drove for 3 hours without stopping, did not turn on the radio, could not stand the idea of sound coming from speakers after what I had heard in those trees. I have looked for Blackwood Forest on every map I can find. Satellite images, hiking databases, government land records, nothing. No forest by that name anywhere near where I was driving that night. No dirt road, no tree line. Like it does not exist. Like it swallowed itself after I left. I do not go on road trips anymore. I do not drive on roads I do not recognize after dark. I do not walk into forests alone. Ever. For any reason. And I keep my phone charged. Because sometimes late at night, when the neighborhood goes completely quiet, I hear it starting up again in the distance. That low frequency building into an emergency tone. And then cutting through the silence like a knife. My mother's voice, calling my name. I never answer. I never will. It started with a poster. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Every time I try to make sense of what happened that summer, I always end up back at the poster. If we had just walked past it, if we had taken a different route out of school that day, if Danny had not stopped to read it, none of it would have happened. But he did stop, and we all stopped with him. And that was the beginning of the end of something I cannot fully name even now. It was the last day of school before summer break. The 6 of us were walking out through the main corridor, laughing about nothing the way you do, when 3 months of freedom are suddenly right in front of you. Me, Danny, Sarah, Ryan, Mia, and Jake. We had been friends since the 7th grade, the kind of friends who do not need to make plans because you are always already together. We turned the corner near the notice board by the main entrance, and Danny stopped dead. He was staring at a poster pinned to the board, 4 size, black background, white text, no images, no school logo, no contact information, just words. Do you remember how to play? Hide and seek. Millfield Park, Friday night, after dark. Come alone or come together. It does not matter. It always finds you in the end. We all read it. There was a moment of silence. Then Ryan laughed and said it was obviously someone messing around. Sarah said it was creepy. Mia said it was probably a student film project. Jake said he was in and immediately started debating which part of the park had the best hiding spots. That was Jake. Always in, always first, always treating everything like a competition he had already decided to win. I should have paid more attention to that last line. It always finds you in the end. But we were 17, and it was the first day of summer, and the poster felt like an invitation to something fun and nostalgic and harmless. So we agreed. Friday night, Millfield Park, the 6 of us. Hide and seek in the dark like we were 10 years old again. I did not sleep well the 2 nights before. I told myself it was excitement, end of school energy, the kind of restlessness that comes before a long break. But looking back, I think some part of me already knew. The way animals know before a storm. Something in my body registering a frequency my brain had not caught up to yet. Friday night came warm and still. The kind of summer night that feels like it was made for being outside. We met at the park entrance at 10 p.m. The park was officially closed, but the side gate near the old tennis courts had been broken for 2 years, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. We slipped through one by one and stood in the dark under the trees, and immediately the mood shifted from excited to something quieter, something with more weight to it. The park felt different at night, obvious in retrospect, but it was more than just darkness. The air felt thicker. The sounds felt muffled. Like the park existed slightly outside the normal world after dark. Like the trees were closer together than they were in the daytime. Jake volunteered to seek first. Nobody was surprised. He walked to the old oak tree in the center of the park, the biggest tree. The one we had always used as base since we were kids. He pressed his hands over his eyes and started counting. 1, 2, 3. We scattered. I ran to the far end of the park and hid behind a cluster of dense bushes near the back fence. My heart was beating faster than the situation warranted, and I noticed that but pushed it down. Ryan went left toward the old bandstand. Sarah disappeared into the shadow of the tree line along the eastern edge. Mia found a gap between 2 large shrubs near the center path. Danny went somewhere near the entrance. I lost sight of him almost immediately. Jake's voice carried through the dark from the oak tree. Ready or not, here I come. For the first few minutes, everything was normal. The familiar excitement of hiding, the specific tension of trying not to make a sound. I settled into my spot and controlled my breathing and listened to the park around me. Wind in the trees, distant traffic, the occasional creak of a branch. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Then Mia was found. I heard her shriek from somewhere near the center path, that specific sound of someone caught off guard, a laugh cut short. Then silence. I smiled to myself. Mia always hid in the most obvious spots. Some things never changed, but the silence that followed was wrong. With Mia, there should have been conversation, negotiation, the familiar back and forth of being caught. Are you sure you saw me? That does not count. I was still moving. There was nothing. Just the shriek, and then absolute silence like a door closing. I told myself I was overthinking it. 10 minutes later, Ryan was found somewhere near the bandstand. Same pattern. A short, surprised sound. Then nothing. No argument. No laughter, no footsteps walking back to base, just silence absorbing him completely. I was sitting very still now, not because I was playing the game well, because something in my body had made a decision that my brain had not officially agreed to yet. Something that said, do not move, do not make a sound, this is not the game anymore. Sarah went next. Same thing, a sound from the eastern tree line. Then nothing. 3 of us gone. Danny and me still hidden somewhere in the dark, and Jake somewhere in between. I heard footsteps approaching my position. Slow, deliberate, moving through the grass with a steadiness that felt wrong. Jake always moved fast when he was seeking, always ran, always made it theatrical. These footsteps were measured, patient, like something that had all the time in the world and knew exactly where it was going. The footsteps stopped on the other side of my bush. I could see the outline of a figure through the branches. Jake's height, Jake's build, standing completely still on the other side of the leaves, not reaching in, not speaking. Just standing there, breathing slowly and steadily with a patience that did not belong to any 17-year-old boy I had ever known. I did not breathe. Then Danny's voice came from somewhere behind me, loud and confused and with an edge of something I had never heard in Danny's voice before. Jake, what are you doing? You found me ages ago. Why are you just standing there? The figure on the other side of my bush turned its head toward Danny's voice, slowly. Like a machine recalibrating, I took my chance. I scrambled out from the bush and ran to Danny, who was standing in the open grass 15 meters away, staring at Jake with an expression I had never seen on his face. Not fear exactly, something more fundamental than fear. The expression of someone whose understanding of the world has just developed a crack. We both looked at Jake. He was standing in the middle of the grass 20 meters away. Still, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly. His eyes were open, but they were not looking at us. They were not looking at anything. They were the eyes of someone who was no longer the person operating the body they were attached to. Danny said his name. Jake. Jake turned his head toward us, too slowly. The movement was mechanical, wrong in a way that bypassed rational thought and went straight to something ancient and animal in the base of your brain. Where are the others? I asked. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Jake smiled. Not Jake's smile. Something wearing Jake's smile like a piece of clothing it had found and put on without fully understanding what it was for. Wide. Too wide. Held too long. Found them, he said. Jake's voice. Wrong cadence. Flat and hollow like an echo of a voice rather than a voice itself. Danny grabbed my arm and we ran. No discussion. No decision. Just pure animal response. We hit the broken gate and kept running until we reached the streetlights and stood under the orange glow, shaking and gasping and staring at each other with the specific look of two people who have just seen something they cannot unknow. We called the others immediately. Mia. No answer. Ryan. No answer. Sarah. No answer. We called Jake. His phone rang from somewhere inside the dark park behind us. 4 rings, 5. Then silence. Then the park was quiet again. We called the police. They searched for 3 hours. Found nothing. No Mia, no Ryan, no Sarah, no Jake, no signs of struggle, no footprints, no explanation. Just an empty park where 4 teenagers had been 40 minutes earlier. The investigation ran for 8 months. Missing persons cases for all 4 of them. Interviews with every student who might have known about the Friday night plan. The poster on the school notice board was examined. No fingerprints, no camera footage of anyone pinning it up. The school had CCTV covering that corridor. The footage from the day the poster appeared showed static. 4 hours of static covering exactly the window when the poster must have been put up. Nothing before. Nothing after. Just 4 hours of white noise, and then the poster was there. The detective assigned to the case told us privately 6 months in that he had nothing. No leads. No theories he was willing to say out loud. He looked tired in a way that went beyond the case. He looked like a man who had looked at something he could not explain and had decided the healthiest thing was to stop looking. Danny and I drifted apart after that. Different universities, different cities, different lives built carefully around not having to think about Millfield Park on a Friday night in the summer we were 17. We talked occasionally, birthdays, New Year. The kind of contact that maintains the form of a friendship without the substance. Then 4 years later, Danny called me at 2 a.m. No greeting, no small talk, just his voice, quiet and tight. "I saw Jake last night," he said, standing outside my building. Same position, same tilt of the head, same smile. I did not say anything for a long time. "He is not Jake anymore," I finally said. "You know that." "I know," Danny said, but he was looking up at my window, like he knew which one was mine. I asked what he did. "I closed the curtains," he said. "I did not sleep." There was a long silence between us, the kind that only exists between people who share something they have never fully said out loud. Then Danny said something that has not left me since. "I do not think it was ever playing hide and seek with us," he said. "I think we were playing hide and seek with it, and I think it let us believe we had a chance of winning. I have not slept properly since that call. And last night at 2 a.m., I heard footsteps on the path outside my window, slow, deliberate, stopping directly below. Then silence. Then a voice I have not heard in 4 years. Ready or not, it found them. Now it is coming for us." Dr. Elena Voss had spent 6 years studying wildlife migration patterns before the grant for Ashwood Forest came through. It was supposed to be routine, a 4-week expedition into one of the last unmapped temperate forests in the region, tracking an unusual species of nocturnal bird that local rangers had reported but never officially documented. Standard field work. Tents, recording equipment, thermal cameras, and 4 researchers who had worked together before and trusted each other completely. The team was small by design. Elena led the project. Marcus handled the acoustic equipment, a quiet man in his 30s who had spent more nights in forests than in his own apartment. Priya managed the data and the drones, sharp and methodical, the kind of person who triple-checked everything before trusting it. And Tom, the youngest of the group, fresh out of his postdoc, eager in the specific way that made the older 3 feel both protective of him and slightly amused. They entered Ashwood Forest on a Monday morning in early autumn. The Forest Service had warned them the deeper sections had not been properly surveyed in over 40 years. No maintained trails past the first 3 miles. No cell coverage beyond the entrance road. They had prepared for isolation. They had not prepared for what they actually found. The first 2 days were exactly what Elena expected. They set up a base camp in a small clearing, roughly 5 miles in, established a grid for their recording equipment, and began the slow, methodical work of documentation. Marcus placed directional microphones at intervals through the surrounding trees, designed to pick up the specific frequency range of the bird calls they were hunting. Priya launched drones during daylight hours to map the canopy density. Tom logged everything in meticulous detail, the kind of enthusiasm that made the long hours bearable for everyone else. It was on the 3rd night that Marcus first noticed the hum. He came to Elena's tent at just past midnight, headphones still around his neck, his face unreadable in the light of his flashlight. He told her the directional mic at the northern edge of their grid was picking up a low-frequency hum, consistent and steady, that did not match any known wildlife pattern. Not insects, not wind through the canopy, not machinery, which would have been impossible this deep into the forest anyway. Just a hum, somewhere between 18 and 20 hertz, low enough that it sat at the edge of human hearing. Elena was not immediately concerned. Low-frequency sounds in forests were not unusual. Geological activity, distant weather systems, even certain insect colonies could produce frequencies in that range. She told Marcus to keep recording and they would analyze it properly in the morning. By morning, the hum had grown louder. Not dramatically, but measurably. Marcus had recorded it through the night, and the waveform showed a slow, steady increase in amplitude. Almost imperceptible hour to hour, but undeniable when compared side by side. Priya Cross referenced it against every database of natural and artificial sound sources they had access to offline. Nothing matched. Tom, predictably, was thrilled. He theorized aloud about unknown geological formations, underground cave systems, anything that could explain a slowly intensifying hum from somewhere beneath the forest floor. Elena allowed herself a small smile at his enthusiasm, but privately found herself uneasy in a way she could not articulate. 20 years in the field had given her an instinct for when something fell outside the boundaries of normal, even before she could explain why. They spent the fourth day trying to triangulate the source. Marcus moved his equipment, taking new readings from different positions, while Priya sent a drone deeper into the forest than they had previously gone, toward the area the triangulation seemed to indicate. The drone footage showed nothing unusual. Dense canopy, undisturbed forest floor. No clearings, no structures, no geological anomalies visible from above, but the audio kept getting stronger. By the fifth night, the hum had become audible without equipment. Not loud, but present, a low pressure in the air that made conversation feel strange, like speaking underwater. Tom described it as feeling like the forest itself had a heartbeat. Elena found the description unsettling, precisely because it was accurate. That night, none of them slept well. Elena lay awake in her tent, listening to the hum pulse steadily beneath the normal sounds of the forest. And somewhere around 3 a.m., she became aware of something she had not noticed before. The hum had a rhythm, not constant. It rose and fell in a pattern, slow and deliberate, almost like breathing. She woke Marcus, and they spent the rest of the night reviewing his recordings side by side. He confirmed what she suspected. The hum was not a single sustained tone. It fluctuated in a cycle that repeated roughly every 90 seconds, rising to a peak and falling away, over and over, with the kind of consistency that nothing natural that either of them had encountered produced. Priya, woken by their conversation, joined them, and after an hour of analysis, offered the observation none of them wanted to hear out loud. The pattern resembled something biological. Slow and massive, but biological. On the 6th day, Tom went missing. He had gone to check one of the remote recording stations alone just before dawn, a task he had done without incident for the previous 5 days. When he did not return by mid-morning, Elena and Marcus went looking for him, while Priya stayed at camp to monitor radio contact. They found his equipment at the station, untouched, recording still running. They did not find Tom. What they found instead were tracks. Large, deep impressions in the soft earth around the station, spaced far apart in a way that suggested something significantly larger than a human, moving in a slow, deliberate gait. The tracks led away from the station in a direction that matched almost exactly with the triangulated source of the hum. They called for Tom for nearly an hour. No response. As the light shifted toward midday, they returned to base camp, both of them shaken in ways neither wanted to admit aloud. Priya had picked up nothing on the radio. No signal of any kind from Tom's equipment. It was Priya who suggested quietly that they should leave. Elena, exhausted and frightened in a way she had no professional vocabulary for, found herself agreeing before she had fully processed the decision. They began breaking down camp immediately. The hum, audible now even in daylight, intensified as they worked. Marcus kept his equipment running, unable to stop documenting even as his hands shook while packing his gear. The data showed the 90-second cycle accelerating, the peaks growing sharper, the troughs shorter, like something approaching a kind of crescendo. They were nearly finished breaking camp when Priya's drone, still hovering on a final automated sweep, captured something on its thermal camera. Elena watched the live feed on the controller screen. Deep in the trees, perhaps 400 meters from their position, a heat signature unlike anything she had ever seen. Not the compact, defined shape of any known animal. Something vast, diffuse, its outline shifting and uncertain, as though the thermal camera itself struggled to define its edges. It was not moving toward them. It was simply present, pulsing faintly in time with the hum, like the forest had grown something that breathed on the same rhythm as the sound itself. The drone lost signal 11 seconds later. They never recovered it. They left everything they could not carry and ran. Elena would later struggle to remember the specific details of that final retreat from base camp to the trailhead, 5 miles that felt both impossibly long and disturbingly fast, the hum following them the entire way, never quite fading, never quite catching up, present at every moment like something pacing them deliberately, allowing them to leave. They reached the trailhead as the sun was setting. The hum stopped the moment they crossed onto the maintained trail system, as abruptly as if someone had switched it off. Tom was never found. The search conducted by forest rangers over the following weeks turned up nothing beyond his initial recording equipment. No remains, no further tracks, no explanation. His disappearance remains officially classified as a wilderness accident, the kind of bureaucratic phrase that closes a file without closing anything else. Elena, Marcus, and Priya have not spoken publicly about what they experienced in Ashwood Forest, beyond the official report, which Elena wrote carefully, omitting the thermal footage, omitting the pattern in the hum, omitting almost everything that mattered. She has not returned to fieldwork since. Marcus still has the recordings, stored on a hard drive he keeps in a drawer he does not open. Priya quietly resigned from the university's research department 8 months later, citing personal reasons she has never elaborated on. Elena agreed to one final analysis of the audio data, conducted privately, away from any official channel, nearly a year after the expedition. The acoustic specialist who reviewed it called her at 11 p.m., his voice tight in a way that made her sit down before he had said anything substantive. He told her the 90-second cycle was not random and was not biological in any sense he recognized. It was structured, patterned in a way that resembled, more than anything else he could compare it to, a kind of counting. He asked her if anyone had ever determined what number it stopped at, the night they left. Elena has not answered that question. Not to him, not to herself, not in the year and a half since. But she still has Marcus's recordings, and on quiet nights, when her apartment is too still and the world outside has gone silent, she sometimes thinks she can hear it. Faint, distant, rising and falling every 90 seconds, still counting. Five of us went camping deep in Hollow Pine Forest the summer after graduation. Me, Marcus, Olivia, Derek, and Priya. We had been planning the trip for months, a last hurrah before everyone scattered to different colleges in different states. Hollow Pine was 3 hours from the nearest town, deep enough that cell signal disappeared an hour before we even reached the trailhead. That isolation was the whole point. No distractions, no responsibilities, just 5 friends and a fire and 4 days before real life started. We hiked in 6 miles to a clearing Derek had found online, a spot with a small stream nearby and enough flat ground for 3 tents. By the time we set up camp on the first evening, the sun was already dipping below the tree line, painting everything in long orange shadows. We built a fire, cooked dinner, and fell into the easy rhythm of old friends who had spent 1,000 nights together already. It was Olivia who suggested the night watch. She had read somewhere that deep wilderness camping warranted someone staying alert through the night, watching the fire, keeping an eye on the tree line. Partly practical, she said, in case the fire needed tending or an animal wandered too close. Partly tradition, the kind of thing old camping guides used to recommend before anyone had GPS trackers and satellite phones. We laughed about it, but agreed. 2-hour shifts, rotating through the night. Derek went first. Nothing happened on the first night. Derek's watch passed uneventfully, as did Olivia's, Marcus's, Priya's, and mine. We woke up the next morning slightly tired but unbothered, spent the day hiking and swimming in the stream, and settled back into the same rhythm as darkness fell again. It was the second night when things changed. Derek took the first watch again, same as before. When he woke Olivia for her shift, she noticed he looked pale in the firelight, his eyes darting toward the tree line more than seemed normal. She asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, just tired, and went to his tent without elaborating further. She did not think much of it at the time. Olivia's watch passed in relative quiet until close to the end, when she said she felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched from somewhere in the trees to the east of camp. She scanned the tree line with her flashlight multiple times and saw nothing, but the feeling persisted strongly enough that she woke Marcus 15 minutes early for his shift, something none of us had done on the first night. Marcus did not mention anything when he woke Priya. She noted this later, the contrast between Olivia's visible unease and Marcus's calm. Priya's watch was the one that changed everything for the group, though at the time she said nothing to anyone until morning. She told us at breakfast that during her shift, sometime past 2 a.m., she had seen something standing at the edge of the firelight to the west, where the trees grew dense and the ground sloped slightly downward toward the stream. She described it as humanoid in shape, but wrong in proportion, too tall, too thin, standing perfectly still and facing the fire directly. She said she watched it for what felt like several minutes, frozen, unable to move or call out, until it simply stepped backward into the darkness and did not reappear. We exchanged glances around the breakfast fire. Derek admitted quietly that he too had seen something on his second watch, though from a different direction, to the south, near a fallen log we had used as a bench the day before. He had not mentioned it to Olivia because he assumed he had imagined it, a trick of firelight and exhaustion. Olivia confirmed she had felt watched from the east. None of us had told each other where we had seen or sensed anything until that moment, and the directions did not overlap. East, south, west. 3 different points around our camp, 3 different nights of the same shift rotation. I had taken the last watch that second night, just before dawn, and had seen nothing at all. I remember feeling almost smug about it at breakfast, until Priya asked quietly what direction I had been facing most of my shift. I told her north, toward the trail we had hiked in on. She went very quiet. We decided as a group to leave a day early. Nobody needed much convincing. We packed quickly, deliberately avoiding direct conversation about what exactly we believed we had seen, falling instead into a tense, business-like efficiency that got our camp broken down in under an hour. It was Derek who noticed the trees as we prepared to leave. Carved into 4 separate trees, one at each cardinal direction surrounding our campsite, were symbols none of us had noticed on arrival. Simple, geometric, carved deep into the bark, fresh enough that sap still beaded at the edges of each cut. North, south, east, west, exactly matching the directions of our 2 nights of watches. We did not discuss it. We simply left, hiking the 6 miles back to the trailhead faster than any of us had moved in years, not stopping for water, not stopping for rest, until we reached the cars and the first hint of cell signal flickered weakly back to life on our phones. None of us have gone camping since. We talk sometimes, the 5 of us, usually late at night over a call none of us initiate, but none of us end either. We compare notes on what we remember, trying to build a complete picture none of us has alone. Derek thinks the carvings were already there and we simply had not noticed them on arrival, too distracted by setting up camp. Olivia disagrees, certain the bark around the carvings was too fresh, the cuts too clean, to have existed before our trip. Priya does not say much anymore when the topic comes up. I think about it most when I am alone at night, in my own apartment, far from any forest. I think about the fact that whatever we each saw or sensed never appeared on the same watch, never overlapped, as though it was deliberately rotating around our camp in sequence with us. Always one direction ahead, always patient, always waiting for its turn to be seen. I think about the fact that I saw nothing during my own watch, facing north, the one direction that had not yet been marked when I sat by that fire in the dark. And I think about the fact that 3 weeks after we returned, I found a single symbol carved into the wooden fence post outside my apartment. North-facing, fresh. The same shape Derek had found carved into that tree. I have not told the others. I do not think I will. There is a valley on the outskirts of a small town that nobody talks about, not because they forgot about it, but because talking about it means remembering what happened there. The valley has been for sale for over 30 years. Dozens of buyers have come, looked at the price, looked at the land, and walked away without signing a single paper. No one ever explains why. They just leave and never come back to look again. In the middle of that valley sits a house, old, wooden, 2 stories, every window intact, every door still on its hinges. From the outside, it looks like any other abandoned house, a little worn down, a little forgotten, but otherwise normal. The kind of place you drive past and think someone should fix that up. But nobody ever does. Nobody ever will. The locals call it the Hollow, not because of any official name, but because everyone who has ever spent time near it says the same thing. It feels empty in a way that has nothing to do with furniture or people. It feels hollow at its core, like something sucked the life out of the walls themselves. Animals do not go near it. Birds do not fly over it. Even the wind seems to avoid it. On the stillest days everywhere else in town, the trees around the hollow do not move at all. Daniel first heard about the hollow on a Tuesday night. He was sitting alone in a bar, nursing his 3rd drink, and not really listening to anything around him. That had become his routine. Come in, sit down, drink until the noise in his head got quiet enough to sleep. He had been doing it for 8 months. Ever since his wife took their daughter and left. Ever since he lost his job 3 weeks after that. Ever since he stopped seeing a reason to get up before noon. He was not looking for a ghost story that night. He was not looking for anything. But the 2 men at the table beside him were talking loud enough that he could not ignore them. They were talking about a bet. $10,000 to anyone who could spend 7 nights alone inside the house in the Hollow. Full 7 nights. No leaving. No contact after midnight. Just a man in that house and whatever was inside it. Daniel put down his drink and turned around. He needed that money. Not just for the practical reasons. He needed it because he needed to feel something again. He needed a reason. And if that reason came in the form of a haunted house in a valley nobody wanted, then so be it. He did not believe in ghosts. He barely believed in tomorrow. What did he have to lose? He signed the agreement the next morning, shook hands with the 2 men from the bar who turned out to be local businessmen who had been trying to sell the property for years. They looked at him, the way people look at someone they feel sorry for but will not say it out loud. He did not notice. Or maybe he did and did not care. He arrived at the Hollow on a Friday evening with a bag, a camera, a flashlight, and enough food for 10 days. He wanted to be prepared. He was not prepared. Night 1 was quiet, almost peaceful. He set up his camera in the main room on the ground floor and walked through every room making notes. Nothing unusual, Old furniture covered in sheets, peeling wallpaper, dust on every surface thick enough to write in. He ate his dinner, wrote in a small journal he had brought, and fell asleep on the couch he had uncovered in the living room. He slept better than he had in months. He noted that in his journal with something that almost sounded like hope. Night 2, the doors started opening, not slamming, not banging, just slowly swinging open on their own, one by one. He checked the windows for drafts, all sealed. He checked the floors for uneven surfaces, all flat. He told himself old houses settle, old hinges loosen. He closed the doors and went back to sleep. In the morning, 3 of them were open again. He had not heard a single sound. Night 3, he heard breathing outside his bedroom window. Slow, steady, like someone standing just below the glass and breathing upward. He grabbed his flashlight and looked out. Nothing. Just the dark outline of the valley and the tree line beyond it. He stayed at the window for an hour. The breathing stopped after 20 minutes. He did not sleep the rest of that night. His journal entry for day 3 was only 2 words. It knows. Night 4, he stopped answering his phone. His sister had been calling every day to check on him. His daughter had sent 3 voice notes. He listened to them. He did not reply. Not because he was busy, but because somewhere between night 3 and night 4, something shifted in him. He started to feel like the calls were coming from very far away. Like voices from another world he was slowly losing his connection to. He sat in the main room and stared at the wall for 6 hours and did not notice the time passing. Night 5. His camera caught something. He had been reviewing the footage from the previous nights, and on night 4 footage, there was a figure, standing in the corner of the room behind him. Tall, still, no features visible, just a dark shape that was there in one frame and gone in the next. He went back through every night of footage. The figure was there in all of them, always behind him, always still, always watching. He called his daughter that evening. He told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. She asked if he was okay. He said yes. He was not okay. Night 6, he called his daughter one more time. She picked up on the first ring. He said 3 words. "I'm sorry." She asked what he meant. The line went dead. She called back 47 times that night. No answer. Night 7. Nobody heard from Daniel again. The 2 businessmen went to the hollow on the morning of day 8. The front door was open. His bag was still there. His food untouched from the last 3 days. His camera still recording. His journal open on the floor to the last entry. They could not read it at first. The handwriting had changed completely from day 1 to day 7. By the last entry, it barely looked human. They called the police. The police searched the house in the valley for 3 days. They found nothing. No Daniel. No signs of struggle. No explanation. The camera footage from night 7 was never released to the public. The 2 officers who watched it both resigned from the force within a week. Neither of them has spoken about what they saw. The valley is still for sale. The house is still standing. And every night at 3 a.m., the light in the upstairs bedroom turns on and off, like someone is still in there, still trying to signal, still trying to reach the world they can no longer get back to. Nobody has gone to check. Nobody ever will.